Not long ago, something happened far above our heads in the silent, cold blackness of space. A Russian satellite named Cosmos 2542 began to move in a curious way. It wasn't just orbiting Earth, it was actively maneuvering, getting closer and closer to another satellite. This wasn't a friendly visit, it was shadowing a U.S. national security satellite, a spy satellite known as USA-245. For weeks, the Russian satellite stalked its American counterpart, sometimes coming within a few dozen miles of it. In the vastness of space, this is like standing nose to nose. This event, unseen by most people on Earth, sent ripples through the world's military and intelligence communities. It wasn't science fiction, it wasn't a movie plot, this was real. Space, for so long a domain of scientific exploration and wonder, was showing its potential as a new battlefield. The conflicts of our world are not bound by gravity, they are extending into the heavens. Why does any of this matter to you? When you use your phone to find the quickest route to a new restaurant, you're talking to a satellite. That Global Positioning System, or GPS, is a constellation of spacecraft that provides precise timing and location data to the entire world. Our global economy and modern way of life are built upon this invisible infrastructure in the sky. They allow us to see weather patterns, like hurricanes forming over the ocean, giving us time to prepare and save lives. They help farmers monitor their crops, connect remote villages to the internet, providing access to education and medicine. From a military perspective, these assets are absolutely essential. Modern armed forces depend on satellites for command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Satellites are their eyes in the sky, able to see troop movements and military buildups anywhere on the planet. Without satellites, a modern military would be fighting blind and deaf. This dual-use nature of space technology is what makes the situation so delicate. A satellite that provides GPS signals for your car is the same one that guides a precision missile to its target. When we think of war, we often picture tanks, jets, and ships. But what would weapons in space look like? The reality is both simpler and more complex than what you see in the movies. The most straightforward way to disable a satellite is simply to run into it. A kinetic kill vehicle is essentially a guided missile whose only job is to physically collide with the target satellite. But there are other, more subtle ways to wage war in space. Imagine a satellite that can sneak up on another one and use a robotic arm to break off an antenna or cover a camera lens. Or consider a high-powered microwave weapon that could fry a satellite's sensitive electronics from a distance, rendering it useless without ever touching it. Then there are jammers, powerful transmitters that can overwhelm a satellite's signal, cutting off its ability to communicate with Earth. This is like shouting so loudly that no one can hear the person they are trying to talk to. Another insidious threat is the cyber attack. Satellites are, at their core, sophisticated flying computers, and like any computer, they can be hacked. Perhaps the most frightening weapon of all is one that creates space debris. In 2007, China tested an anti-satellite missile on one of its own defunct weather satellites. The test was a success, but it created a cloud of over 3,000 large pieces of trackable debris, and likely hundreds of thousands of smaller, untrackable pieces. This cloud of shrapnel is still orbiting the Earth today. This is known as the Kessler syndrome, a scenario where debris from one collision causes a cascade of new collisions, trapping us on Earth beneath a deadly shell of our own making. For a long time, the sheer difficulty and expense of operating in space created a kind of natural peace. Only two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, had significant space capabilities. However, the world has changed dramatically. Space is no longer an exclusive club for just two. Today, dozens of countries and even private companies can launch and operate satellites. The United States established the Space Force in 2019, a new branch of the military dedicated solely to space operations. Its creation was a clear signal that the United States considers space a distinct war-fighting domain. Russia has tested ground-based missiles capable of destroying satellites in low Earth orbit. In 2021, it conducted a test that destroyed one of its own old satellites, creating a dangerous debris field. China has made incredible strides in its space program over the past 2 decades, and its military ambitions have grown alongside its civilian achievements. The Pentagon has reported that China's goal is to become the world's preeminent space power. India successfully tested its own anti-satellite missile in 2019. France has announced plans to develop bodyguard satellites equipped with lasers. This global trend shows that the world's leading powers are actively preparing for space conflict. Given these worrying trends, is a war in space inevitable? Not necessarily. There are paths we can take to keep the heavens peaceful, but they require a concerted effort from all spacefaring nations. The most important step is to establish clear rules of the road. Just as we have international laws for the sea and air, we need a robust framework for responsible behavior in space. A simple but effective measure would be to establish a dedicated multinational hotline for space activities, similar to the one that existed between Washington and Moscow during the Cold War, to prevent accidental nuclear war. Another key area for cooperation is the problem of space debris. This is a threat that affects every nation, regardless of their political alignment. A collaborative international effort to track and remove dangerous space junk would be a powerful confidence-building measure. We need scientists, diplomats, and military leaders to come together not to plan for space war, but to actively plan for space peace. The cost of failure is simply too high. We must embrace space as a global commons, a shared resource essential for the future of all humanity. We must encourage a vision of space as a sanctuary, a place for science and exploration, not for weapons and warfare. Look up at the night sky. On a clear night away from the city lights, you might see the faint, steady light of a satellite gliding silently across the backdrop of ancient stars. Each of those moving lights represents a piece of our collective human genius. For decades, this frontier has been a source of inspiration, a place where we have, for the most part, set aside our terrestrial squabbles to achieve incredible things together. The International Space Station stands as a shining example of this. The benefits we derive from space, from weather forecasting and global communication, to the sheer wonder of seeing images from distant worlds, are too precious to lose. Will we use our satellites to build bridges to new worlds or to build walls in the sky? Will we turn our gaze to the stars with a sense of wonder or with a sense of fear? The choice is ours. The universe is vast and we have only just begun to dip our toes into its cosmic ocean. Our planet is a single shore, and the satellites above are our first tentative vessels sent out into that great unknown. Maintaining peace in space is one of the great challenges of our time. It is a test of our wisdom as a species. Let's work together to ensure that when future generations look up, they see a sky full of promise, not a battlefield.